And we're back like we never left. Oregon fans, what's going on? How we living? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres, and boy, do we have some news to get into today. Oregon is officially heading to the Big Ten. The huge news breaking on Friday, so had to get up on the channel, also on Twitter, to get you guys the latest and get some thoughts on this huge development. I'm not alone, though. I got my guy Rian Winter, a.k.a. Sports Chat 503, holding it down from the beautiful Oregon coast. How we doing, man? Been a minute.
Fantastic, man. Like we never left, like you said, Max. So good.
Of course, we have a bit of trouble. Let me shoot it here, and hopefully we'll be all right. So just bear with me. Sorry about that. Well, I'm not going to touch it, and hopefully it'll be okay. But yeah, Ryan, good to see you, buddy.
So good to see you, Max. You're the man.
I appreciate it, man. Well, so yeah, this is a big, huge news, right? I have a couple of press releases that I wanted to read. I think we can talk about Oregon, some recruiting impact. I love recruiting, and then talk about the future of the Pac a little bit. So this is from Oregon's, press release today. This is President Carl Schultz saying, quote, "I'm thrilled that the University of Oregon has the opportunity to join the nation's preeminent academic athletic conference. Our student athletes will participate at the highest level of collegiate athletic competition, and our alumni, friends, and fans will be able to carry the spirit of Oregon across the country." How about we start off with your feelings, Ryan? I know you did quite the live stream yourself earlier today.
Yeah. No, it like I said, it is a monumental day for people in the Pac-12, Oregon specifically, my Oregon State brethren, plethora of other people. This is a serious day. I mean, this is a day that literally the thing has changed completely, and it's a lifetime change. This is the only time it's happened in my lifetime. This has been the case, and I don't expect it to change in the future. Although I'm saying that now, anything could happen. But I do think that the first line there was really important to them. The fact that Oregon finds themselves in the what they call preeminent academic and athletic conference. I think that's really important to them. Oregon has really tried very hard over the years to set themselves apart from the rest of their competition in the Pac-12, and a lot of due diligence from a lot of different groups. And this is kind of what I was saying on my live stream today. Was just how proud I am of being a Duck, that they actually made this happen the whole way. Because 15, 20 years ago, this would not have been an option at all. And the fact that Oregon is wanted, that Oregon has value, that Oregon has built this brand, from all the big donors all the way down to, everybody who's involved, students, alumni like yourself, anybody who's been involved with this process, we've all been, a part of it. And as myself as well, and ticket holder, donor, whatever I can be, a small fry or whatever compared to some of these other guys. It was a team effort that made this happen. And it was really impressive to kind of see that happen today and kind of look back at it and be like, oh my God, I can't believe that the Ducks are now in the Big Ten, a place that the entire conference is respected. All those universities are very well respected across the board. They all bring it in a variety of different levels on all different athletic levels. And I do feel bad for the student athletes who have to now make travel a complete bear. And I was not really into that. I was very split going down this path. But as soon as the university said this is a go and what we're doing, I was 100% in. And I'm just really thankful that the Ducks and the whole community at large made it happen.
Yeah, and you have to think that this move was in the works for quite some time, right? Ever since USC and UCLA made the first move to leave the conference and head to the Big Ten themselves, Rob Mullins and the rest of the brass over there at Oregon, they didn't want to be left behind. I think that you look at this from a couple different ways. They wanted to try to dominate the Pac-12 as the biggest remaining brand there after USC and UCLA left. And then you had Colorado leaving to return to the Big 12. So there were a lot of things that put this in motion. And I don't want to say it was a matter of when, not if, because there was a lot of smoke, and we thought this was going to happen quite a while ago, or at least there was some rumors about it quite a bit ago. But really, what it comes down to, Ryan, I think as much as I admired the Pac-12 for what it was, leadership aside, just the pure athletic product, this was really survive and advance kind of a deal. Either you are the haves or the have-nots, right? We were talking about this on the phone earlier today, and it would have been great to see the Pac-12 stay together, but Oregon had to make this move because it's pretty evident now that it's going to become, the SEC and the Big Ten. Those are going to be, they are the two premier conferences in college athletics.
Yeah. And it's too bad that the West Coast just had no control over it. I mean, it feels like it was completely taken away from us out here. You're right. I mean, I think it did happen last year when LA schools went out there, and then they did their due diligence then. I think the Big Ten knew then that Oregon was an option, that Washington was an option. They just had to kind of see other things fall. I also think that this has been somewhat of a conspiracy over the years with the other conferences looking to try to get rid of one of these conferences. And, media, everybody else has been slamming the Pac-12 in a full-blown assault over the last 4 or 5 years, and especially during COVID. In COVID, it felt like they thought it was a wounded animal and they could bury it. And, the fact that UCLA and USC left was very congratulated by the rest of the country, especially in the media. And the media love to be like, oh, we don't like this at all, but it's necessary to do it on the, And so, I do think that there was something to be said that Oregon was not wanting to be left behind, like you said, and that was in conversations very early on, as soon as USC and UCLA left, that they would be next. And I know that the Big Ten didn't want to feel like they were the killer of the Pac-12, but they were the ones who took the first two with UCLA and USC. So I think everything changes, and this might be a good thing for everybody. At the end of the day, it gets Oregon in a place that's very solid. It gets Oregon in a place where it feels like it can be competitive against a different peer group, which I think was maybe important for them as well. But I do feel bad for the rest of the conference, and I do hate breaking up relationships that are so old and established out here on the West Coast.
Yeah, and let's read this statement from the Pac-12, just because we've been talking about the conference and, kind of how it's an emotional day for them. You're seeing other schools release their statements saying we're sorry to see, some of our member institutions, making their decisions, because we can't gloss over the fact that Arizona State, Arizona, and Utah are also leaving the Pac-12 as they're headed to the Big 12. But this is the statement from the Pac-12 released on Friday. Today's news is incredibly disappointing for student athletes, fans, alumni, and staff of the Pac-12 who cherish the over 100-year history, tradition, and rivalries of the Conference of Champions. We remain focused on securing the best possible future for each of our member universities. So short and sweet, saying we're sad that this is happening, but we're still kind of dedicated the best they can, I would think, to keeping things going. And
was that 4 sentences?
Yeah, it was real short.
There's 4 members left. So I mean, it's surprising to me that the Big 12 doesn't just try to come in and swarm and swoop up the rest of the conference. I saw some chitter chatter on Twitter today about the Big Ten, and the Big 12 and the ACC or whatever and SEC, and I think it's fine, that it's going to go that route. They talked about, the old days, Big East had an automatic qualifier to the BCS. And that changed when they lost Pitt, and all of a sudden then their conference went down. Well, they didn't get that back. And I think the Pac-12 is still kind of thinking that they might have rights to the CFP. There's millions of dollars that comes the Pac-12's way because of the CFP. Well, that might change completely now. And I don't think you just replace who you lost in one day with the Mountain West schools. And God bless them. I think the Mountain West has great universities, but it's not what the Pac-12 was. And you can't just call it the Pac-12 and expect to move on. I do feel really bad for the Bees, and I feel bad for the Cougs. I do think the Bees would be a good fit in the Big 12 if they could get there. But I don't think it's in their hands. I don't, and I didn't even really think it was in the Ducks' hands either. I know I saw Canzano said something where, the decision that the Ducks is going to make or break the conference. I don't know if this was in anybody's hands. Again, if you're on the sinking ship and there's one lifeboat, you go. There's not many options here, and I don't know how interested the Big 12 was in Oregon either. So it's kind of one of those things where when I hear media reports saying, oh, Oregon should have just gone to the Big 12 or Oregon should have, well, I don't know if there was an option. I mean, up to 2 weeks ago, I don't know if Oregon was an option in the Big 10. They are now an official member. I mean, that's how fast this thing happened. So, I just think it's a wild time. I think it speaks more to the idea that these media conglomerates have so much power now. And I go back. I mean, I'm 45, so I go back a little bit more. And I remember a time when, the Ducks weren't on television. They didn't have to have a major media deal to have a program. They didn't have to have a major conference to compete. These teams historically, there were a bunch of teams that were independent for years, doing great in bowl games, winning national championships as independents. Now those days are gone. You have to be attached to a conference now because of that money coming in from the TV deals. And what your bread and butter is recruiting, that's the next step, is to understand how this impacts not only the lifeblood of your program going forward, but it impacts the recruiting. That now you're in a real life conference that you can't be recruited against because you're not in said conference. And I do know, and you know better than I do, that there were definitely recruits that Oregon lost because of this wishy-washiness of the conferences and where are you going to be in the next couple of years.
Yeah, and then that's a good segue into another one of the talking points that I had for today's show is the recruiting impact that this move is going to have for Oregon. Obviously, as soon as the 2024 class, this cycle that we're currently in. And I like to say I'm getting more and more connected as time goes. And, I've heard from people that, USC was holding this over Oregon's head, negatively using it to negatively recruit against Oregon. Which isn't a surprise, right? I'm sure that UCLA even did the same thing, but they're not nearly as much of a recruiting threat as USC is to Oregon. So I think that this is a move that we could absolutely see generate some positive recruiting momentum for Oregon. As we record this, there's a couple of really big time guys that are going to be announcing their college commitments in the coming days, in the coming weeks. Some that come to mind are St. Louis wide receiver Jeremiah McClellan, who's been a priority for Junior Adams and the Ducks. Santa Ana Mater Dei running back Nate Frazier is going to be announcing this weekend. I think Georgia is going to be the call there. But this getting this done before the season, I think, is really good for a number of reasons. But the fact that Oregon is going to be able to, tout that they're in the Big Ten is huge. And then the recruiting battles that they already found themselves in. With Ohio State every now and then, with Michigan and Penn State, those are only going to keep going up. But from a recruiting impact standpoint, I think this move is nothing but good for Oregon because, like we said, it goes back to that point of being the haves and the have-nots. You're going to be able to sell exposure better. You're going to be able to, make sure that you still have plenty of funds going around. Not that Oregon was hurting for money, but I think that this is obviously going to help bring more money into the athletic department. So I'm pretty fired up, as a guy who loves recruiting, that this move went down. But, I do want to say that I feel for, the traditionalists and the people who, really love the rivalries in the Pac-12. I like them too. I don't want to just be talking about the stuff that I'm excited about because, it is sad that this really does kind of spell the end of the pack, but I definitely wanted to hit on recruiting.
Yeah. Well, no, the recruiting aspect I think is huge. And it's just, again, it speaks to the lifeblood of the program. You also spoke on the money. I don't think Oregon was as worried about the Apple deal as some of the other schools in the conference were, because I think they could probably, pony up some extra cash. They've had the philanthropy through the boosters. They just signed Lanning to a deal that was basically done outside of the money stream of the university. It was done basically through other means. And, I think they just didn't want to be held down by the rest of the conference. And recruiting is a huge deal. And the fact that you could be technically negatively recruiting against another team based on what conference they're in alone really speaks to that. So I do know that, some of these guys at the heavy ends of the spectrum when it comes to the athletic directors or the presidents of these universities might have different perspectives than the average fan, and definitely different perspectives than the media conglomerate. I look at it from the perspective of a fan that goes to games. One, I look at it as a fan, of the whole process. The entire, whatever you want to call it, from start to finish, production of what it takes to put on these games, and it's a big deal. And so, like I had on my YouTube, I had Daryl the truck driver who drives the gear to different things, and we were talking last year about literally about the logistics of what does it mean if you have back-to-back weeks out on the East Coast. And what does that look like for your gear? What does that look like for you? Do you have to keep the guys out there? Do you practice out there? Do you have to get 2 sets of gear and have one set in a truck sitting out there in Maryland and one set? I mean, there's a lot of things that are kind of up in the air there. So just a bunch of different stuff to think about. I do like the idea that this is the end of late night games for Oregon. Oregon is not going to play any more late night games. That's over. The idea of maybe every once in a while there'd be an also ran game like a Purdue or something that they don't really have that much value with or whatever, and you could stash that late night and try to get a different window of time. But for the most part, I think every game Oregon's going to be playing is either going to be 12:30 or 3:30. Pretty much on the nose from here on out, home games and away games. Obviously, with away games, you're going to be dealing with it a whole lot earlier from our perspective, wake up and watch the game. But I think that'll be refreshing for a lot of Duck fans.
And you mentioned a really interesting point, just talking about Dan Lanning's new contract, Ryan. I mean, if you're just looking at the health of the Oregon program, we're a program podcast. If you're looking at the health of the Oregon program right now, you just inked your head coach to a huge contract extension through the 2028 season. Lanning's not going anywhere. He has a massive contract buyout, which shows that, if he wants to go anywhere, he's going to have to, put up quite a bit of money. So everything he's done, everything he's said has really just emphasized that he's in it for the long haul. And then now Rob Mullins and the Oregon Athletic Department have tabbed him as their guy, the guy that they think can get them over the hump, can get them to that next level, back into the college football playoff. And ultimately, right, you hopefully get the program's first national championship. So you have your new head coach, you have your head coach locked in for the long term, and now you have some conference stability, which, they haven't had in the last year, right? Ever since USC and UCLA left, the question was always what's going to happen to Oregon. And now they and the Huskies, a rival team, we can talk about that a little bit. They're all heading to the Big Ten.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you said about the thing about Lanning. You and I were talking earlier and talking about, what do you compare this day to? And you talked about, well, when Cristobal left and getting Lanning and the Twitter spaces and having his brother on the thing and, all these kind of things that we were so jazzed about. But, it's tough to fit one guy into all the boxes. It's hard to have the unicorn, right? The guy that's a good recruiter, the guy that's a good on the field coach, the guy that's a good communicator with the guys, the guy who feels like he can be one of the guys, but also leads the program, CEO type, but players coach at the same time, guy who can be good with the boosters, guy who can be good with the media, guy who's not going to make mistakes on and off the field, guy who's got a strong family, core values or whatever. Young family wants to stick around. One of the big things for me, and again, Joey Harrington's a year younger than me. We both grew up in the same CYO basketball leagues or whatever in Southeast, Northeast Portland. He had a very similar mindset that I did. What we were really concerned with when we got the new coach was loyalty, was somebody who was willing to stay here, somebody who wanted to be here. And when I heard Rob Mullins say that this is the guy and this is the amount of connectivity that he's presented to him and the university, somebody who's been as deeply connected to the university that we haven't seen since Bellotti or Brooks. That one, literally, the hair stood up on the back of my neck. Like, we loved Chip. Chip was a game changer to us. Chip was like Ben Franklin to the founding fathers. The guy was a completely different cat. He did things totally different, which was great. And we've changed our way of doing things because of Chip. He hasn't been our coach for 10 years. We're still doing stuff that's related, right? And then the other coaches, blah, 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 blah. But when Cristobal left, our biggest fear was finding a coach that could actually want to stay here and really want to put down roots. And you found that Not only did you find that, you found that in a guy like Lanning, who came in his very first year after getting boat raced in the first game, put together a very good season, put together a great recruiting class, got all these good transfers in, melded the whole thing together, brought a bunch of new coaches in here. And that's the other thing about adding a new contract to Lanning. Everybody else gets paid more too. What
Everybody
happened last
eats.
year? Yeah, everybody eats. What happens last year? You lose Dillingham. Well, what do you do this time? You have Will Stein. Now these guys are making more money. Now you go to the Big Ten, where you're going to see other offensive coordinators making over $1 million, 200, $2 million, or whatever the case may be. It's going to start to being, like we said, the haves and the have-nots. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody is in it to win it. There's a lot of schools over there in the Big Ten that we're going to see in the future that they are proud programs, great universities, super academic, all that and the other. Terrible football team. And I'm telling you, the Ducks are coming to take some wins in this conference. They're not coming in this conference to lay down. They're coming in this conference hot. And I really like the idea that these 4 schools from the what was the Pac-12, are going to come into this conference, and they're all going to be successful in both football and basketball. I think this really helps us in basketball as well. It's a great basketball conference. And we're bringing in some serious talent here from the West Coast. So I don't know if the Midwest really knows what's coming.
Well, yeah, no, that's a great point. But before I respond to that, we got like 60 people in here on YouTube. So appreciate you guys for showing out. I saw we even had a Penn State fan that came over to say what's up and see what's going on.
Much respect to Penn State, by the way. I was at that Rose Bowl. Kajana Carter, first play, 80 yards into the end zone. I was there. I got much respect for Penn State. And I do think that right now, Oregon and Penn State are kind of on the same level. Similar type of tier. I do think it might be one step behind Ohio State and Michigan right now in football, but I think that Oregon, USC, Penn State, I think they're right on the same level.
Yeah, no, that's an amazing comparison. I would definitely want to discuss a little bit more, but yeah, I was just gonna say, if you guys are here in the live stream on YouTube at Oregon Football Max Torres, do me a favor and blow up that like button for me.
Let's go.
Subscribe to the channel. We just hit 2,300 subs. So really, really appreciate the support. But yeah, just blow that up for me, and then hit that notification bell so you don't miss future shows. But we got maybe about 10 more minutes or so, right, Ryan?
I'm game. The clouds kind of came in a little bit, so it's all good.
All right, right on.
But I'm here. I almost did 3 hours of a live stream today. I mean, I'm ready to talk.
All right, cool. But let's talk about Oregon's chances in the Big Ten, because it's a good conference. You're going to be going up against teams like Ohio State, Michigan State, Penn State, Wisconsin. Oregon's already had some really good matchups against Wisconsin and in the Rose Bowl. They're going into the Big Ten with some momentum against Ohio State. It was one game. I'm not saying that's the huge deal, but they've shown that they have the blueprint and the kind of guys to compete with Ohio State. And I think that it's going to be really difficult to win this conference, but I think Oregon's absolutely going to be competitive, and certainly going to make a name for themselves. And I think they're going to surprise some people in terms of just making some noise and probably taking some games that they're not going to be favored in that first year when they arrive in 2024. So I think that they're definitely going to be a very competitive team and someone that has to be taken seriously by the rest of the Big Ten Conference.
I would completely agree. I think that if you look back at Oregon historically, you got to take it in kind of decades, right? And over the last maybe 10 to 20 years, Oregon's been very solid. If not one of the best teams in the West Coast, the best team on the West Coast. So, I mean, you're talking about right there. I mean, you're a top 15 team when you're pretty well just having a good year. You're a top 10 team when you're having a great year, and when you're having like the elite years that we've seen in the past, you're top 5. So, I mean, how many conferences are there? How many top 10 spaces are there? I mean, you're bringing in a good team. You think about UCLA. I think UCLA is going to have some trouble. I mean, UCLA, I feel like is more on the level of like a in Iowa sometimes, where sometimes they have a good year and then they'll have 2 or 3 down years. And then they'll have maybe a breakout year or two, everybody have the expectations, and then they'll fall on their face or whatever. I think they might have some trouble, but I feel like USC and Oregon and Washington to a degree as well are all walking into this conference with a lot of confidence. I would say right now, football-wise, if you were to do it this year, Oregon is the 3rd or 4th best team, maybe 5th best team. If USC is who we think they're going to be, they're probably in the top 3 with Michigan and Ohio State. And then you've got Penn State and Oregon. And it's kind of like that's your top 5 of that conference. I think Oregon beats almost anybody else in that conference. I was not very impressed with Wisconsin last year. Iowa is a step down. Obviously, Northwestern won the first game and then lost every game afterward. Purdue has not, surprised me that much lately. And those are the kind of things you need. And a team like Purdue, that's a surprise type of team, right? They're average team. Every year they're 6-6, or they're going to the Outback Bowl maybe on a big year, and on a bad year, they're going to the Weed Eater Bowl or whatever. But they're never really in huge contention. And they might surprise you though. That's a team that might surprise you. They're kind of like Iowa State. No one wants to go to Ames to play. Like they're a team that's ready to get you, kind of like the Cougs are in our conference. And you find yourself in this situation where if you're the Ducks and you look at this whole conference, I don't see that many teams that are, better than the Ducks. Obviously, you talked about the Ohio State game. Well, the last time Oregon played Ohio State wasn't really Oregon's best team, and they beat Ohio State in Ohio State. So, if they're going to use the fact that Oregon doesn't have a national championship for all these years that Oregon sucked, well, at least we can use the one time that we went to that stadium and actually won a game. I mean, come on. So, like I said, I think Penn State has got a great thing going on. That'd be really awesome to go there for a whiteout game. But they're going to have trouble coming to Autzen. These teams are not going to fare that well out here. And I think Oregon and Washington are really going to surprise them. I think in basketball as well. I think they got something coming. I think it's going to be a tough trip to come west for these teams. And I think a lot of teams might look forward to it. I heard Dave Softy Moeller on a show earlier today on some other show talking about how at the very beginning of this relationship, every conference game is going to feel like a non-conference game because we're not used to playing any of these teams. So there's going to be an excitement level. There's going to be a lot of Big Ten people who want to come out west to see Lake Washington and Seattle, and they want to come to see Autzen but how many years are they going to want to do that? Like, we don't need to add 15, 20,000 seats to Autzen to fit the Big Ten people that are going to come out here. That's not going to be that regular of a thing. I mean, you're going to pick up a couple 10,000 the first year or so, but it's not going to be that regular, right?
Yeah, no, that's a good point that you mentioned it. I mean, because Oregon usually, gets pretty close to selling out Autzen on a regular basis, and we talked about how it's going to be good for Eugene. Just having the Big Ten crowd commuting and traveling out west like that, and that's going to help Washington and USC and UCLA. I mean, Lord knows USC needed the help before they hired Lincoln Riley with how empty the Coliseum was. But now there's all the excitement in the world around that conference, that program. Excuse me. There's one more big thing I wanted to get to, Ryan, was just how this move to the Big Ten impacts Oregon's shot at the playoff, because I think it helps and it hurts a little bit. And really the big point that I'm kind of thinking about is how it really just reemphasizes how important the 2023 season is for Oregon, because they have their quarterback back in Bo Nix, who could very well find himself in the Heisman conversation. You absolutely retooled this roster with so many talented transfers coming in. Jordan Burch has to be the guy that's, poised to make the biggest impact, or I'm sure Oregon fans hope he makes the biggest impact of the transfer haul. But, the playoff is expanding to 12 teams. So this is the last year that they're going to be operating on a 4-team model, and Oregon needs to cash in, because the Pac-12 it's not gonna be easy to cash in, because this is probably the most hype we've had around the Pac-12 in quite some time. You got quarterbacks galore, you got head coaches that are settling in. Schools are hot, man, but I think this is the time to cash in, and it's not gonna get much easier as far as the path to the playoff once they get to the Big Ten, albeit they're going to be in a conference that's much more well respected. And I think that all of those games are going to carry a bit more weight than they do in the Pac.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I totally agree with the time is now. I saw Tim Brando on another show earlier. I've been watching goddamn everything this whole time, and I really respect Tim Brando, and he has Oregon at the number 3 spot to end the year. He thinks Oregon's in the top 4 and that they're in the CFP, and I don't know. I go back and forth on it. One, I think there's a huge amount of bias against the West Coast, especially now in the last year of the Pac-12. What they're going to give the Pac-12 the 4-teamer the last year as a courtesy or something. I think you're going to have to pretty much win it outright or be USC to be able to get in there. Now, maybe other stuff happens. We've seen this before. Chaos goes down. Other teams lose 2 games. This, that, and the other happens. But it feels like to me that, yes, you're right. The chances of going to the playoff in the 12-team format, I think, are equal or greater by going to the Big Ten. And because I think that Oregon is poised to be at the top 5 of the Big Ten consistently, I would say that you're going to get a pretty good shot at 2, at least, maybe even 3 teams on some years from the Big Ten in that 12-team playoff. So that means that just like what we saw with that year that Alabama and LSU and all that sort of stuff, and they met each other again, you don't have to go and win your conference. You don't even have to win your side. You don't even have to go to your championship game. You could technically, with enough wins, put yourself in a position where if you, let's say the Ducks are in the Big Ten, they lose to Ohio State, and they win all their other games, but their one loss is to Ohio State, but they don't go to their championship game or whatever because of this, that, or the other. Now they're sitting there with the 1 loss, and it's still Ohio State. Well, you're going to let that team not go? That's an automatic, especially in this 12-team. That almost would fly in the 4-team. This year, though, I think it's really hard to get to the CFP because I think there's a huge bias against the Pac-12. I also think you got a tough schedule. It is user-friendly a little bit in the sense that there's breaks in it. You don't have that 3-4 weeks in a row of a gauntlet. But second week of the year at Texas Tech is going to be a hell of a game. And I think that sets the tone for the whole year. If they go out and play well at Texas Tech, I expect great things from them the rest of the way. If they have a tough time with Tech, then anything goes. Buckle up. You got the 4 games that I think you really have to worry about. You got 2 of them on the road and 2 of them at home. I think the Beavs are the one you have to really watch for at the end of the year. Obviously, the Utah game up there is going to be really ridiculously hard. Not many teams are successful up there. USC at home was billed as a gigantic game because it was the last game. USC, not anymore. USC's coming back to Autzen in a couple of years. But that's still going to be a huge game. Heisman Trophy, everything else is going to be on the line. And it could be also a game day situation. But you got to get past Washington first. Washington is the first of those 4 big games. And you could go into that game undefeated if you're the Ducks. They could go in undefeated. It could be an absolute whirlwind in Seattle. Anything goes. Bets are off up there. I think it could be a huge game. I'm going to be there because I just can't not go to that game. But then that game adds even more excitement to this thing with the rivalry going forward because they're the new in-conference rival. They're the new, not the new Beavs, but they're the new in-conference rival. So it's going to be an amazing year. I do think the Ducks have a really good shot to get there, but they're going to have to go at least 3-1 in those 4 games, if not win them all.
Yeah, and now that you mentioned that Washington game, I'm looking at the schedule, and that fortunately for Oregon, they have their bye week right before that game. So I don't know how we feel about early buys, but Oregon plays Stanford on the road. Troy Taylor's first year. Stanford's known for being a really, really physical team that you can never really count on. Even though things have been tough over there for the Cardinal. But that's probably going to be a physical game. And then fortunately for the Ducks, they get to rest up a bit before Washington.
Yeah, and Washington has a bye that same week. That was a big thing always that Washington would always try to use against her. You guys got the bye before us, and we had to go on the road. Now everything's even. Everybody's got that bye before that game. I don't like the bye early in the year, but it is before one of these big games. And at the Stanford game, you can really lay it down. Take a week off. Like I said, I think you might be undefeated going into that Washington game with the rest of the schedule looks insane, including that last week before the Beeve game going down to Tempe. That's going to be a hell of a game as well. Even though they're in rebuild mode, you don't know what they're going to get. Hell, maybe Rashada's starting at the end of the year.
That'd be crazy.
It could be. I mean, you don't know what you're going to get. Kenny Dillingham, all bets are off. Year one, Kenny Dillingham, come on. So I think it's going to be awesome. I think it's going to be fun to watch. But I think it's just going to be a tough year. And if Duck fans are expecting 10 wins, I think that's right on the number. I think that there's probably 1 or 2 losses out there. I don't know where they are, but I could see there easily being. I mean, you could play this thing out where you lose to Texas Tech, you lose to Washington, and now you're looking at the rest of the schedule like, now what? I mean, that could be a real reality. And again, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think Oregon's going to beat Texas Tech, but I think they're going to be an absolute fight against Washington. I think it's going to come right down to the end, like it has done the last couple of years. Both teams are good. That team's returning a lot of players as well. They've got the quarterback as well. I mean, this is like Walt Disney storyline stuff. And so this is a big, big year for the Pac-12. And, it's the end of it. So why not go out with a bang?
Yeah, and I think that's obviously something that's on everybody's mind up in Eugene. You want to finish on a strong note now. But, an additional storyline, I don't know if I'd say it's a pressure, but you want to have a good season so you can have some momentum going into the Big Ten. Sure. If you have a rocky season and it's not the way that you want to transition into a new conference, but I don't think that a rocky season is something that Oregon's going to have. At this point, especially last year, the 2 games that they lost outside of Georgia were just, tough losses. And I don't think it was mismanagement. I think it was a tough break with Bo getting hurt. Just the effort wasn't really there in the Oregon State game. I don't think that was, a bad call necessarily that you can isolate. So
thought we had in the bag, dude.
Yeah, definitely.
Bought the plane tickets in the third quarter, Max.
Oh, I bet.
Bought the plane tickets to Vegas in the third quarter. It's like, here we go.
Oh, man.
Oh, where are we staying, guys?
It looked promising.
Oh, wait a minute. We're not going? Okay. Hey, there was a story of a guy with one of the boosters. He bought like a $10,000 suite for the game. Oh,
man.
Like not a ticket, a $10,000 suite for the game. In the third quarter, bought it right there. So no, I mean, you got to give the Beavs credit on that one. Again, that one stung, like a kick below the belt, but you have to rebuild. You have to give them credit. I mean, they won that in classic Beav fashion. They just built the dam. They stopped throwing the ball. They ran 29 consecutive times or something. The Ducks just couldn't stop it. And what's funny is, the week before was the best defensive performance of the entire year in the Utah game. The week before that was an entire meltdown in the passing game. So it's like, what the hell team is this? And that's why it was so crazy.
What is this, Oregon basketball?
Oh, it was very similar to Oregon basketball. Get blown out by ASU and then have the game of the year against Arizona in 2 days. The hell happened there? But then you turn the whole thing around and you get to have that the Holiday Bowl win. One of the other things is a guy who goes to bowl games. I'm excited about the Big Ten bowl matchups. They have way better bowls. Now, I don't know if I want to go to some of these things down in Florida or somewhere else. They're not out here, but they've got some pretty cool matchups in the Big Ten. They always have good games. We're always playing the 5th best team, They got good matchups over there. So again, I just feel like, like what you started the whole thing off with was by saying, hey, what the president said today was, hey, we're in the elite. We're in the upper crust, and we made it. And again, like I was saying on my show today, that, hey, I'm just so proud that the Ducks did this thing, because historically the Ducks are not of this ilk. And that's why USC hates us. And that's why USC looks at us as new money, because we are, for the most part. They're the blue bloods. They've got Heisman trophies they have so many trophies. They had to
I don't know if I call them a blue blood.
Hall of trophies. Like they have like a Hall of Champions thing in there, USC.
Yeah.
So they've got so much tradition, but as of late, we've been the ones that have held down this conference. And, over the last decade or so, they've had a couple good years here and there, but it's been the Oregon Ducks since about 2010.
Yeah, no, they've been the ones that have been on the up and up, and before Lincoln Riley got hired, they were kind of on the down, right, the downgrade.
Big time.
So that's exactly what it was. But it's cool that kind of both programs are on the rise, in the upper echelon as they make their way over to the Big Ten. But was kind of thinking about winding this one down, Ryan. Just any kind of final remarks from you, and then I'll wrap us.
I think it's a day to celebrate. The first thing I did when I heard it this morning was I put on Kool and the Gang Celebrate, right? So it's a time to celebrate, but it's also, it's pretty crappy time as well, because you lose. You have to give a little bit of time, like you have on a loss, a 24-hour, hey, and then flush it. We're on to the next one. Losing the relationship with the Beavs in conference, they're still going to play the game. I swear they're going to do their best to try to play the game. They made a full statement today saying it's important. So did Washington. But, it's not going to be that easy to have games against the Beavs in all sports. Football, you can make that happen. That's fine in the future. But to play basketball every year, to play this, that's difficult. And I do feel that there's something lost there. So I am kind of split. But I am excited. I feel like they got a lifeline. They jumped to greener pastures. The grass is still very green in Eugene. The Big Ten's going to find that out. I love for USC that they didn't want us there, and we are right there behind them. Like, hey, buddy, we're going to meet up with them. Like in that meeting, the first one, like, hey guys, how are you? Oh, nothing
Remember
makes me
me?
feel better than that a little bit. I am sad for the Beavs. At the same time, don't want to be an elitist duck, but I'm like, man, it sucks, dude. We're see ya. And I hope what's best for them, that it works out for them. But it's every man for themselves right now, and it sucks that it happened like that, because the Pac-12 never should have ended like this. The Pac-12 was way too proud of a conference. And I don't understand how they couldn't find enough money out here. Apple's beyond rich. Apple has more money in the bank than the federal government. Apple couldn't find $5 more million at school. Are you kidding me? I mean, so it's like, that Apple walked away from the NFL deal. They were in negotiation. They were in negotiation with the NFL, and the NFL stalled on them or something. They just pulled the deal. Like, so I mean, it's like, do you want to be a part of this thing or not, Apple? Like, so I just it's frustrating that they couldn't make it work, and that we don't have, true representation on the West Coast. It's all jarbled now, and everybody's going to have a piece of the West Coast or something. I don't really like that. But as a Duck fan, we made it. We're good, and we're on to greener pastures. Like you said, it's going to keep the money flowing. It's going to keep the recruits coming. It's going to keep the excitement there, and really it's going to keep eyeballs on the screen. That's the bigger thing, is it's going to keep your product available. I heard that Fox has already suppressed what word I'm trying to say, gone more than, what's the word, you're surpassed, right? Surpassed. God, I'm dyslexic. I don't know if you guys know this, but surpassed, there you go. I thought I was going to say surprised for a second there, a Bill Walton moment, but that Fox has already surpassed the ESPN membership. And so Fox is all in on sports. I think they know that they're not really at the spot that they want to be politically on their news side. And I think they're going to put a lot more money into sports at a time when ESPN is cutting, business
all their heavy hitters.
They're firing people left and right. The business tree feels like it's shrinking. Fox is spending money on it. So I'm excited to be a part of that and be a part of them and connected with them. And I feel like that's a very healthy relationship. So thank you so much, Max, for having me on. You're the man. I really appreciate you and everything you do for the Oregon Ducks and the Oregon Ducks community, man. You're the best.
Oh, I appreciate it, Ryan. Yeah, so a lot of good points there. I mean, Oregon's going to stay with a lot of eyeballs on them. They're going to have all that exposure. I agree with you that it's definitely sad to see the Pac-12 end this way. Formally hasn't ended, but I mean, we can all see the writing on the wall at this point. I think Oregon very much had their hands forced, when all of this started unfolding. Survival of the fittest kind of a deal. That's what I was trying to say earlier. So it's going to be a fun ride. No shortage of curveballs being thrown our way in the past, couple of years with conference realignment and NIL and transfer portal and coaching carousel. It's all craziness, but we're just doing our best to stay up to date with it. But really had a good time with you on the show today, Ryan. Appreciate you hopping on such short notice. Before we get out of here, where can people find more of you and what you got going on in this space?
Oh yeah, you're the man, and thank you for helping me with Surpassed. I was literally on a Bill Walton moment there. Yeah, you can find me. I'm on YouTube. I always say I'm going to try to do the podcast thing and put it on Apple or Spotify. I don't even know how to do it. So at this point in the game, I'm just on YouTube. Max, you're the man. You were the guy that told me to go live. I'd never done live. I'm a big fan, and now it's totally changed my whole world. I go live all the Tuesday nights through the regular season. So if anybody wants to jump on, come on in. I'm usually drinking beer, and I try to keep it light. But, I love the Ducks so much. I'm here for them. Had a lot of subscribers pick up over the last, week or so because of the new Big Ten. Hey, there we are. I also haven't changed any of the pictures on there. But I do have Don Essig saying Sports Chat 503 on my intro page that I think is legendary. I don't know how many years Don has left, but no, I just am very passionate about the Ducks and want what's best for Oregon. I want what's best for everybody. I want what's best for the Beavs too. But when it's that cut and dry at the very end, man, it's every man for themselves. There's no way in hell I'm reaching my hand out trying to get the Beavs on the boat. Come on now. I mean, it's just at the end of the day. But I am saddened and happy at the same time. So it does feel a little strange. But good times always by everybody. And thank you so much, Max. You are absolutely the man. We really appreciate you.
Appreciate it, Ryan. Well, if you guys want to find more of me, you can follow me on Twitter, on X. I'm still going to call it Twitter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at mtorresports. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel at Oregon Football Max Torres, and you can read all my written work over on ducksdigest.com. But until next time, guys, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to talk ball with me and Ryan. Thanks to Ryan for coming on, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Ducks Dish Podcast.